The second lecture on the theory of reasoned action and theory of planned behavior just focuses on the theory of reasoned action. And when we're looking at the theory of reasoned action, what distinguishes it from the theory of planned behavior, as I mentioned in lecture 1, is that it just focuses on attitudes and subjective norms. So in this lecture, I'll be talking about what we mean by attitudes, what we mean by subjective norms, how they're calculated, and then how does that get used to then modify behaviors, or what's the point of knowing how people make their decisions. So to the first of these variables, attitude. As I've said before, attitude in the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior has to do with what we perceive are the outcomes of a behavior. Not just that we think the behavior is good or bad, but what do we think are going to be the outcomes of the behavior? And to calculate that, we have to look at two pieces. The first one is belief evaluation. And belief evaluation is whether or not we think that the outcome of that behavior is good or bad. And I have there, that would be, if it's that would be good, it's +3. If you say that would be bad, it would be a -3, right? Because a person's going to score a given outcome from -3 to a +3. So if we're talking to teens about why they shouldn't start smoking, because pretty much every person who begins smoking does so, I think, before the age of 18. Research, I think, is pretty clear about that. We're looking at how are these young people making that decision to start smoking, right? And we often talk about all the risks and dangers of smoking. And we want people to say, oh gosh, the goal here is to say, oh gosh, if I got lung cancer, that would be bad. That would be a -3. Of course, there are other outcomes. It might be things like you're going to impress somebody that you are attracted to. Well, you would find that to be a good thing to do. So you might give that a positive score. And we're going to have these negatives and positives, and they're next to each other possibly, right? Things about social acceptance, as well as health outcomes. That's belief evaluation. There's always then the question of whether or not the outcome is going to happen. And that's belief strength. Belief evaluation is, will the outcome of this behavior be good or bad? Belief strength is, will I ever see that? So if I think it will happen to me, I would rate that on a scale from -3 to +3 as a +3. Or maybe if I think it's just might happen, but I'm not sure it will, it might be a +1, right? But it's up to a +3. If I don't think it'll happen to me, I put it at a -3. So as I say, when we're trying to discourage people from smoking, we talk a lot about health effects. What we're hoping they'll do is say, that would be bad if it happened to me, and I'm afraid it's really going to happen to me. Right? And what we do in that case is we're going to multiply, or actually in all cases, we multiply the score from belief evaluation, we multiply it by the score for belief strength, and that gives us the attitude component. In this example I'm using just at the moment here about smoking and health outcomes, it would be, that's what health outcomes would be, attitude component. Another attitude component could be things like impressing peers, right? Or maybe people just feel like it makes them more mature. That could be an attitude outcome, or attitude component could be feeling more mature, impressing peers, health outcomes. Those could all be individual attitude components, and you'd calculate them by multiplying belief evaluation by belief strength. So ideally, we want people to say, as I've circled in red there, boy, me, the health effects of smoking will be really bad, and I'm afraid they're going to happen to me, right? And that would then give a person a score, in that case, of -9, because we'd multiply the -3 by the +3 and get a -9. Right? Then we're going to add up all of the scores of the attitude components. So this health effects thing, maybe somebody's like me who's always been worried about their health because I was just sort of uptight at a young age. Makes me a fun guy. So I think the outcomes of smoking would be bad. It's -3. I'm afraid it's going to happen to me. I'm a pessimist that way. That means that part's a -9. But if I'm deciding to smoke or not as a teen, maybe I think that it would really impress other people if I did it. And I might think that give that a +3, right? Because I think it's important to impress other people. And I think there's a chance, not great, but I think if I do it, it might impress them, it might not. But so I'm going to give it a 1. That would be a +1, and times a +3, which would be a +3, right? +1, +3 equals 3. And so we'd add that +3 in against that score of a -9, and we'd say, well, the score's gotten a little bit better. Went from -9 to -6, a little bit lower score, not as negative an attitude about smoking. So we actually would sum up all those attitudes. Let's work through another example to make that a bit more clear. Here we're going to talk about texting and driving. So in the left column I have there texting and driving will, and then we're going to have 3 outcomes of that behavior. And then we have a column for a person's belief evaluation, a belief strength, and a product. And all of these are going to be scored on a scale from +3 to -3. It's important that scale has an equal number at both ends. Or it has the same number, right, at both ends, just one's negative, one's positive. So, possible outcomes of texting and driving. You could cause an accident. You could kill someone, say in a car accident or a pedestrian. But also you can make plans, right? And so we're going to ask an individual to evaluate how bad do you think these things are. And let's just say a person said, I think causing an accident would be pretty bad, so on a scale of +3 to -3, it's -2. I think killing someone is the worst thing that can happen, it's a -3. But, making plans for dinner or for later today, just catching up with friends, whatever, that's a pretty good thing. It's a +2. Okay. Well, that information is not enough for us to understand how do attitudes affect this person's decision to text or not, right? We now have to look at their belief strength. How likely do they think it is that they will experience this outcome? So for that first one, the person says, yeah, causing an accident would be pretty bad, but I don't really think it's going to happen, right? I sort of doubt it's going to happen. That's a -1. This, by the way, is probably somebody who doesn't know that people who are texting while driving, in fact, are worse drivers than those who are drinking while under the influence of alcohol. Right, but so if a person thinks, well, I don't think I'm really going to get in an accident, it's -1, and if they say, if I got into an accident or whatever, I mean, I really doubt I'm going to kill anybody, that's a -2. But, making plans to meet up with somebody, or some dinner plans or a date or whatever it is, I mean, I think that's likely to happen. I think I'm likely to make plans if I text while I drive. So for each one of these lines, we're going to multiply. Multiply -2 by -1, we end up with a +2, right? Negative times a negative equals a positive. The -3 times -2 gives us a +6. And then we have +2 times +3 gives us a +6. Those are all positive scores that is already predicting a person is going to text while they're driving. So that's what the person gets, is a 14. Now before we go any further, I want to take a second to just think about each one of these scores as being on a continuum someplace, because a 14, like what does 14 mean? Like I'm going to text and drive, or maybe, or like probably, like the slim chance, like what does 14 mean? Remember, for each one of these there was a continuum. So for the belief evaluation, belief strength, we had a +3 to a -3, and since it's always the product, right, which is where you multiply for those first 2 cells, it means each product could be between a +9 and a -9. So all the way down there at the bottom, for all these components put together, it means that 14 is on a continuum from +27 to -27. So 14 itself doesn't mean anything unless we understand where it is. That's somewhere between a +27 and a -27, which tells us, first off, it's definitely not a negative number, so it's supportive of the behavior. And 14 is not super close to 27, but it's not like it's a 3, right? So as we're talking about attitude, like I say, a person scored a 14, so what? And it's relative to that scale of a -27 to a +27. And we can visualize that, right? Here's a scale, -27 at one end, +27 at the other end, and there's 14. So not only do we predict a person is going to text and drive, but there's a just better than even chance, right? Just right about even chance, I guess, that the person is going to text and drive. And it's pretty decent, right? Got a 14 out of 27. It's not like it's a 5 out of 27. Or if somebody else has a -8 out of 27, they're not too likely to text and drive, right? So these scores are all relative, and we have to look at it for each person. Where are they on the continuum? And when we do research, we're always looking at, as we say, the aggregate, sort of all people. But when we look at these scores, what does that mean for us in persuasion? If we haven't really gotten that yet, as persuaders or to persuade somebody, what do we do with this information? What do we do with these scores? Well, these scores can identify areas for change. First off, we could change what people perceive as the outcomes of a behavior, right? That's the belief evaluation. I put in there BE, right? But we can change a person's perception of the outcome. We can help them to see that, in fact, texting and driving is, does cause accidents. That texting and driving does actually kill people, right? We can change the belief evaluation. And it might be that people think, yes, texting and driving does kill people, just the same way that some people say, well, yeah, drinking and driving does kill people. But then there are those people who have an unfounded belief that they, however, are very good and very special and it will not affect them, right? So we might then have to change a person's sense of likelihood, or likelihood that this will happen to them, which is, of course, the belief strength. So if we don't need to change the person's sense that texting and driving will kill, and some people have to get them to do that, we have to get them to understand that they, in fact, can also be sufficiently distracted that they might be in an accident or kill somebody from texting and driving, right? This is where you put people on a special course and you have them texting and driving and you roll a ball out in front of them and you watch them roll into the ball and you say, see, you too can do this. Of course, we can't do that for everybody, but we have to find messages that help people to see that they are, as theories like expanded parallel process model says, that they are susceptible, right? That this can happen to them. So we'd have messages that get people to believe that the outcome is there and it's bad, and the outcome can happen to them, right? We might have to focus on one or the other, depending on what their scores are. And in this case, the person already had pretty negative attitudes about things like being in a car accident or hitting or killing somebody, but they just thought that they wouldn't be the ones who did it. And so that's the sort of message we'd want to have there to change their attitude. Now that we've talked about attitude, we need to talk about subjective norm. Subjective norms concentrate on what we call normative beliefs, and these normative beliefs are based on the reference. And there's a T in there. It's not a reference misspelled. It's a reference with a T in there. It's hard to say. It's a referent, and the plural is reference, but it's hard to get that sound there, or I can't make it very well. And those reference are our peers. They are the people that we respect, the people we look up to. That's who the reference are. So, in any given example, my blank would think it's a good thing to do. My blank would think it's a bad thing to do, right? So I'm going to talk a lot about parents here. So my mom would think it's good, +3. My mom would think it's bad, it's a -3. Well, just like with attitude, there's more to this. It's not just what do you think another person's attitude is toward it. And actually, we ask what multiple people's attitudes, multiple people in your life, their attitudes about it, or what you perceive their attitudes are. But it's a matter of your motivation to comply. So there are times, thinking about your youth and some of your spotty decisions, that there are some things you did that you knew your parents thought were bad. But the question is, did you care about their opinion on this topic? Did you think they were out of touch? Did you think they were unrealistic? Did you think they were hypocritical? Right? That's going to affect your motivation to comply. And so here it is, basically, I care about their opinion, you give them a 6, versus I don't care about their opinion, that'd be a 0. And just like with attitudes, we're going to multiply these two scores. So we're going to multiply normative beliefs by the motivation to comply, and that'd be a subjective norm component. Again, I'm saying component because we might ask about your opinion that you believe is held by your parent, your best friend, and maybe somebody older than you who you look up to as a mentor. Right? Might ask about those 3 people. Those would each be subjective norm components. Right? Each one of them, you have a score for what they think and how much you care about their opinion on this topic. So you do that multiplication, and right, it's things like my mentor thinks it'd be a bad thing to do, and I really care about their opinion. Be a -3 for their score, +6 for how you evaluate them. Be a -18. That would strongly be discouraging you from engaging the behavior. And as I say, we then would go and add up all these subjective norm components, and that gives us our subjective norm score, much like with attitude. Really just the same as with attitude. Here then is a chart to calculate subjective norm, much the same way we did with attitude, and we're going to use the same example of texting and driving. You might notice here, as you look at the top, about the scales, and this is something I've actually already referenced in the previous slide, that beliefs are on a scale from +3 to -3. These are your reference belief about the behavior, and that's the same scoring system we use for our personal belief evaluation. But look there, motivation is different. It's on a scale from +3 to a 0. So why is that? Well, there's some debate about this, but most people put it on a scale from some positive number equal to what we've had before, right? 7-point scale. So in this case, a +6 down to a 0. Because if you had motivation to comply was a negative number, that would mean that you did things just to annoy somebody. That would be like saying that you are eating unhealthy foods just to stick it to your doctor, to your physician, right? Just to show them. People might do that sometimes, but by and large, people don't do that. I'm not saying we're always logical people, and we don't have any, what that's called is a psychological reactance. But really, by and large, people don't do things just to thumb their nose at other people. They typically do things because they think there's support for it or not, but not just to thumb their nose at somebody. So that's why the scale goes from +6 to a 0. Disagree with it or not, but that's how we generally use this. So the reference that we're going to use, we're going to use your mom because I don't know why not. We're going to use a friend, and we're going to use a professor. So texting and driving, what do they think? Mom doesn't think it's a very good idea. It's -2. Your friend thinks, yeah, no, that's fine, +2. And your professor has seen the research and thinks it's a terrible, terrible idea to text and drive, -3. Now, how much do you care about their opinions? So you're a good boy or girl, just like me, I'm sure I'm a good boy, and so you care about your mama's opinion, or at least on texting and driving, maybe not on other things. And so you are strongly impacted by her opinion, right? I will admit to this day, I am pretty good about stopping at red lights because my mom said to me one time, you know, you notice you seem to sort of push lights between when sometimes they're turning red. That's not a very good idea. And I don't know why, but that, of all things, that one has really stuck with me for the last 20 some odd years, which is odd, I'd say 20 years because I'm only 29, but anyway, right? So my motivation to comply with my mom is a +6, or your mom is a +6. Right? Your motivation to comply with a friend is a +4, and your professor, hey, like your professor, okay, but not that much. The opinion doesn't carry a whole lot, so it's a +2. So we multiply to get our products. So the score for your mom discourages texting and driving pretty well. The score from your friend seems to encourage texting and driving, and your professor discourages it. Just not as much as your mom, because you don't care about what your professor thinks as much as you care about what your mom thinks, even though your professor has a harsher attitude on it. Right? You see that sort of that difference there. So you have a score then of -10. And just like with attitude, we have to understand that -10 is being a relationship to other numbers. So again, if we look at what all the scores could have been, right, normative beliefs are all between +3 and -3. Motivation complies between a 6 and a 0. So every product was between 18 and a -18, which means that -10 is out of a score from -54 to a +54. So -10 is good, but it's not really as high as it could be. As before, the -10, so what? And as I said a second ago, it's relative to the scale of -54 to a +54, and so that would look something sort of like this, where yes, they have a negative score, it's a -10, but on this scale, the numbers come out at the -54. So they sort of think that there's not support for it, but it's not overpoweringly strong to keep them from doing it. But it could be worse. You could have a +28 and feel like there's a lot of people encouraging them to be texting and driving. As with attitude, we need to ask, once we get these numbers, what do we do with them? Like, so what does it mean to us as persuaders and in persuasion? Again, these identify areas for change. And so one of the places we might change or have messages to create some change is what people perceive as being their reference opinion. Sometimes on campus at ETSU, you'll see signs up that say things like 80% of ETSU students will have 2 or fewer drinks this weekend. Right? It's trying to change for those who might be binge drinking. What do you think your friends think of you not drinking much? Well, if 80% of them aren't drinking much, they probably don't think much of you just having a drink or no drinks this weekend, right? They're trying to help you change what you see as being your reference opinion. right? When we say things like, your friends really won't think more or less of you whether or not you smoke, right? We're trying to change how you perceive your reference think of this behavior. Also, we may change how much concern you have for your reference opinion. Some universities, and when I was at LSU, which is where I have my PhD, as part of what's called the Campus Coalition for Change, they're trying to reduce alcohol consumption, really binge drinking on campuses. And one thing they've done there is to try to strengthen relationships between faculty and students, because they see that students perceive that faculty probably think binge drinking is not a healthy behavior, and so they want students to have more respect for faculty's opinion as a way then to decrease their drinking, right? So it's sort of like, yeah, our professors probably don't think I should be binge drinking a whole lot. And the idea is, if you can help students to forge better, positive, appropriate relationships with their faculty, they may care more about that faculty member's opinion and be less likely to binge drink. And that actually was true. They found that when students have stronger connections, appropriate connections with faculty, they do seem to be less likely to binge drink. It could be because of self-esteem reasons, but also could be because now they feel more mentored and they follow that other person's opinion more. So that's where it's persuaders we can do, right? Just like with attitude, we can affect an evaluation of a behavior, and then our perception of how much we really care about this person's opinion of that of the behavior. So the theory of reasoned action, in sum, we're looking at attitude, which is really about the attitude toward behavior, and we're looking at subjective norm, and those two combined, in a more complicated way we're going to get in here, right, to calculate, those two combined create behavioral intention. And once we calculate behavioral intention, we believe we have a pretty good idea of the behaviors people are going to engage in. So that's what the theory of reasoned action is. Now it's time to talk about the theory of planned behavior.